Spencer. I'm a program coordinator for the Ottawa Community Food Partnership. I'm just here to talk to everyone a little bit about food access, how it works, and a little bit of the drawbacks that we're seeing with our current food banking system. So for those of you who don't know, some might, but food banks in Canada are relatively new. They've only been around for about 40 years. The first one was established in Edmonton in 1981 as kind of an emergency food response to people who were going without. Since then, that industry has really boomed. We have 26 food banks and pantries in the city of Ottawa alone. So it's really expanding rapidly to try and meet the need. And unfortunately, what we're seeing is that food banking does not meet the need. In Ontario last year, there were about 1.4 million individual visits to the food bank, which equates to just over 550,000 people who were regularly accessing food banks. Here in Ottawa, as an example, Partage Vanier, which is one of the small-ish food banks, will see about 80 to 100 people every single day, Monday through Friday. And it's important to understand also how these food banks operate. Most, not all, but most will operate on standardized box systems. So they'll put in dried goods, canned goods, maybe some produce and some protein. But these don't really take into account individual preferences. They don't take into account cultural restrictions, dietary restrictions, and it's really difficult to meet dietary needs if these are all just standardized boxes that everyone's eating. Unfortunately, there is a mythology that these systems do work, considering the amount of capital, political capital, money, time, effort that is kind of thrown at these institutions from corporations and politicians and the community at large. Why wouldn't it work? It should be working, but it's not. 1 in 5 people who are categorized as food insecure don't actually access the food bank. And there's a lot of reasons for why that is. The biggest kind of predictor of whether or not you will be food insecure is your income. And it's very time consuming to be poor. So in order for you to, catch the bus, find childcare, arrive on time at a scheduled time, scheduled location, provide ID, provide proof of address, just to get a box of food that may or may not meet your dietary needs for that week or that day. Most people in Canada who are food insecure are working, so it makes a lot more sense for these people to just pick up an extra shift at the restaurant they work at, go pick up and get another job in order for them to go and purchase the food that they want with dignity that they can eat themselves. So what we know is that food banking does not solve the problem because the real problem is of access, and we access food in Canada currently with income. And unfortunately, there's a deep shame and stigma that's also attached with going to the food bank, which no matter how welcoming and nice and lovely volunteers and staff members at these organizations can be, that stigma is just really not going to go away, because culturally we see going to the food bank as a moral failure. So I also want to talk about something that's a little bit different, and if everyone can just kind of take a moment and picture how they like to access food. Like, what are you smelling? What fragrances are you smelling? What are you hearing? Is there laughter? Is there music? Is there conversation? Where are you? Are you in a restaurant or your home or a community center? These are how we want to access food. This is food access with dignity, and this is the kind of access that we're really looking for to go beyond food banking. Because food is an expression of identity. It's an expression of culture, both individually and as a collective, and it has the potential to create community, solidarity, and if that comes with dignity. So in 2007, we had a study that was done in Canada which studied a number of community kitchens from across Canada, and they found that participants who regularly access these community kitchens saw that the food was of higher quality, it respected their dietary needs, it was culturally appropriate, and it allowed them to cook what they wanted, when they wanted. Fortunately, it also saw slight increases in actual food security because they were able to take the savings that they got from using these community kitchens and putting them towards purchasing the food that they wanted. This is community access, and it's half the battle. So what is a community kitchen, community grocer, or community restaurant? To put it very simply, it's a nonprofit, usually a social enterprise, in the community, owned by the community, operated for and in the community. Often they are worker cooperatives, and community kitchens will often offer co-working spaces where people can go and cook the food that they want. There's a lot of incredible examples of community organizations like this, but I'd like to highlight a few that are across the world. One is Place at the Table, which is a community restaurant in Raleigh, North Carolina. And they opened in 2018, and since then they've served over 60,000 meals. And they have a sliding scale, pay what you can system. So if you can afford the real price, you'll pay it. If you can't, they have an adjusted price. If you can't pay that, an hour volunteer gets one meal. They have over 100 weekly volunteers. And what is key here is that people feel like they've earned their meals. Again, going back to the stigma that I just talked about, there is a lot of stigma with charity, and people want to be able to feel like they've earned what they've been given. And I think that that's really key, and we can see that across organizations. Another one is Open Kitchen, which is a group in Berlin which connects newcomers and refugees in Berlin with long-term residents. And they will often create culturally diverse meals within shared spaces, shared kitchen spaces, kitchens that have been donated by restaurants, or in more intimate private events at residents' home. This is creating community. It's creating access with dignity. There's also Feed It Forward, which is a community-owned grocery store in Toronto. They divert food waste that would go from grocery stores that is then brought to this place. They also have a pay scale, pay what you can, and if you cannot pay, the food's free. Oftentimes, people like to give back with donating their money, food, or time. There's a similar grocery store like that. It's called Seed in Guelph. They also have a pay what you can and pay scale, sliding pay scale, which they use to provide access to anyone who wants it. They also run a really fascinating program where you can get a doctor's note that's redeemable voucher for fresh fruit and vegetables, because as we know, food is healthcare. Here, closer in Ottawa, another example is the Ottawa Community Food Partnership organizes a community fridge network. This is barrier-free access. You leave what you can, you take what you need, there's no questions asked. And also we have the Minnewassini Food Bank, which is connected with the Parkdale Food Center. And they are a little bit unique, like many food banks are trying to transition to this model where they offer a grocery-style program. So instead of getting a standardized box, you can go in and actually shop for the food that you want to make sure that people are getting the food that they want and are actually eating the food that they're receiving from the food bank. I do want to note that all of these community organizations are only a part of the puzzle, along with things like land access. What we also need is combined support from provincial and federal governments. We need community housing. We need minimum wage that's indexed to inflation. We need social security that's indexed to inflation. We need free and reliable transit, childcare, lunch programs. I mean, as long as we're working within this capitalist system, these are things that are going to have to change if we want to see food security actually take root. But it is possible. Imagine every neighborhood had a community grocery store, community restaurant, a community kitchen where people can go and cook the food that they want, purchase the food that they want with the money that they have, or work for the food that they want to consume, create community. I think that this is all very possible, and there's spaces right now within Ottawa where this can be done. I mean, how many empty schools do we have, especially in the winters and in the summers and on weekends? Even like every restaurant that closes down, that is an empty space. These spaces exist right now in Ottawa, and they can be utilized. So lastly, I just want to say that no matter what, with these community engagement organizations, the key is that we have the community engage. So I want to thank everyone for being here as well, because this is part of that engagement. This is that first step. So thank you.